The air has been contaminated by exhaust fumes. The air has been contaminated by exhaust fumes. Automobile exhaust has been incriminated in air pollution. Automobile exhaust has been incriminated in air pollution. How long will it take to exhaust this library? How long will it take to exhaust this library? The air was polluted by exhaust gas. The air was polluted by exhaust gas. Engine and exhaust data were collected. Engine and exhaust data were collected. The car emits no exhaust gas and very little noise. The car emits no exhaust gas and very little noise. I am exhausted. I am exhausted. He was fairly exhausted. He was fairly exhausted. She exhausted her money in a day. She exhausted her money in a day. The laborers are completely exhausted. The laborers are completely exhausted. He is exhausted from work. He is exhausted from work. He has exhausted his energy. He has exhausted his energy. He exhausted all his energy. He exhausted all his energy. I exhausted myself by walking a long distance. I exhausted myself by walking a long distance. The two policemen were exhausted. The two policemen were exhausted. I always feel exhausted. I always feel exhausted. I'm exhausted with bringing up a child. I'm exhausted with bringing up a child. I got completely exhausted from the heat and busyness. I got completely exhausted from the heat and busyness. We exhausted our funds. We exhausted our funds. You must be mentally exhausted. You must be mentally exhausted. Our supply of food is exhausted. Our supply of food is exhausted. I got home exhausted today. I got home exhausted today. The soldiers were exhausted. The soldiers were exhausted. I exhausted my savings. I exhausted my savings. He exhausted himself by staying up all night. He exhausted himself by staying up all night. We've exhausted our supplies of food. We've exhausted our supplies of food. I'm feeling exhausted after exercising. I'm feeling exhausted after exercising. She quickly exhausted her savings. She quickly exhausted her savings. I'm exhausted from walking around all day. I'm exhausted from walking around all day. I think you are probably exhausted. I think you are probably exhausted. The long war exhausted the country. The long war exhausted the country. We were exhausted by the climb up the hill. We were exhausted by the climb up the hill. The petroleum resources of this country are already exhausted. The petroleum resources of this country are already exhausted. After a night shift I feel utterly exhausted. After a night shift feel utterly exhausted. The men were exhausted with 10 days fighting. The men were exhausted with 10 days fighting. He exhausted his strength on the work. He exhausted his strength on the work.